Hello everyone, it's Shel C from Paper Studio, and today I'm designing for StencilGirl Creative Team. I am going to make some wearables, which in my case are earrings, and I'm going to make them out of shrink plastic. I have a couple different types of shrink plastic here. There's a white, and then there's also a clear. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make some little measuring tools with my shrink plastic so that I can see the size that it will be when it's shrunk. Because I have these little bezels that I bought from Amazon. They're inexpensive little rectangular bezels, and I want my shrink plastic that's been stenciled to shrink into the size that will fit into that bezel. So I'm taking a strip of the plastic, and I did one for the clear plastic and the white plastic because sometimes different brands have different properties. And I made marks using my 6-inch ruler, and then I am simply shrinking it so that my new little ruler, my new tiny little ruler, it shows the size that things will be shrunk. I am shrinking these with my heat tool. You could absolutely do it in the oven, and it probably comes out better with less curling and things, you know, just because. So then I'm using my little shrunk ruler to measure out the plastic in the right size to fit inside my bezel. Now you're wondering to yourself, why do you need to use shrink plastic for this? Well, my concept is that I want to make something very small, but I want to keep the integrity of the stencil shape. And the only way I can think to do that is to stencil it large and shrink it small. That is all there is to it. So I started out with the white ones. I ended up liking the clear ones better, but the first ones I did were the two white rectangles. Another thing that you need to remember when you're using shrink plastic is that the color that you put it on when it's big is going to intensify a lot when it's small because the plastic is shrinking and bringing the color down. So I first used some pigment type ink, and I used very light colors, very light, pastel-y colors. That particular ink was from Brutus Monroe, I think. And I just put it right onto the plastic by just tipping the little tiny ink pads over and pressing it down onto the plastic. Next, I have a couple archival ink pads. These work great for stenciling, and I have these little brushes that were designed to be makeup brushes, but work great for stenciling, and I use them all the time with ink and paint. So I used a little bit darker colors, just a little bit tinier, darker, light application of that archival ink over the background with another stencil that has words on it. It's a mask, actually. And then I'm using these little figures, a male figure and a female figure, with the gray archival ink. You know, it's going to shrink. It's going to be black when it's done. And I also added just a little bit of decorative design as well using this ATC mix-up stencil on these. I used a lot of different stencils. This time it's purple, and I put it on one side. See, I want them to match, but not be the same. Excuse me. So one's the left and one's the right. So I also noticed that the bezels had a little bit of a curved corner on them, so I trimmed those off. The corners, just a little bit of a trim with some scissors before I shrunk them. Then I used my heat tool to shrink them down, and I use an acrylic block. That's a very dirty acrylic block, but I just use it to flatten down it gets kind of curled when I'm doing it with my heat tool. So I flatten it down with the acrylic block by just setting it on top of it. And of course the plastic's very hot at that point. You don't want to touch it. It also likes to blow all over the desk. But so now I've got these small pieces. I do need to modify them just a tiny bit. So I use a little sanding block to sand the edges. And I also use my scissors. I can actually trim a little bit off and sand it to make them fit down into the bezel. Yes, I measured it. but this is my first set, and maybe my measures weren't exactly 100% great. Also, there is some variation with the shrinking. I should have went downstairs and put them in the oven to see if they shrank more uniformly. They probably do in the oven. I'm in my studio. I'm not going to go downstairs and turn on the oven and, go through all that process. I don't have any type of toaster oven or anything in my studio. So I get them to fit in there. Takes a little bit of adjustment. The next ones that I do are better because I adjust my measurements. Everything is just a little bit of a trial and error situation. So to stick them inside the bezels, I use this Dimensional Magic from Mod Podge. You could also use Crystal Effects, or there's another one that's really popular from Ranger. It's basically dimensional clear glue. And I put them in and glue them down. And of course, I'm going to also put a layer of that Dimensional Magic over the top, which I show later on in the video. At the beginning, I told you that I liked the clear ones better. And the reason that I ended up liking the clear better is because it shows the shiny silver that's in the back, that's in the bezel itself, through anywhere that's not stenciled. So I thought it turned out really cool. This next set, of course, is going to be with the clear plastic. You can see it on there. It's harder to see on the video, but I think you can see it. And once I put some color on there, you'll see it really well. So I start with the peach colored pigment ink, and then a little bit of the pink and the peach. Maybe it was the pink first and then the peach. Little tiny things. And then I use a baby wipe through a stencil, and I wipe off so that I end up with just the design on there, the design of the stencil on there. And then anything that's clear in the background will show the silver from the back coming out. And then I decide to use this botanical stencil, which I love, from StencilGirl Club. This was September Club, I believe. Sorry, I'm a little bit off the screen. Sometimes that happens when you're focusing. So you can see they're very light, but you remember that when the plastic shrinks, it gets more intense. So you just have to remember that. I did use a brush pen, which is a Pentel pocket brush pen. It has India ink and then a little synthetic brush that makes an interesting effect. So I traced the shapes of the botanical stencil with that. And then I shrunk them down. And remember, my idea is that clear will be see-through, and you'll be able to see the silver shining through from the back. And that does actually work. At the very end, I have a little part of a video where I kind of twist them back and forth so that you can see. It's hard to see things that are shiny on video. It doesn't work. Even in photos, it doesn't work very well. So I tried to do it with my photos as well to see, so you could see the shiny stuff coming through the back. You can see the bezel is shiny, and then when I put the glue on there, that glue will dry clear. So there's no worry about that. A lot less adjusting this time. Of course, that's not yet dry. They have to dry, but you can still see that some of the shine is going to come through from the back, which I think is an added bonus of using the clear shrink plastic. There's my other ones, which are getting dry now. And here's a photograph of them outside. You can kind of see the silver a little bit. I also added beads to the tops of them, just, to add a little bit of shimmery, shiny stuff. So here I am putting a coat of that Dimensional Magic over the top of the first ones that were done with the white plastic. And now I'm going to do my third pair. This one is done all with this butterfly wing or flower, if you choose to look at it that way, stencil. I will have the links for all the stencils that I used in this video below the video, down below, so you can go to StencilGirl Products and find them. So again, I'm using some pigment ink. That's the oily type of ink that you use for embossing. And I've got a different brand. These are Stampin' Up! Ones from a long time ago. And I'm just using the ink pad because I have the tiny ink pads right through the stencil onto the shrink plastic. And this works very well. So either the archival ink or the pigment ink works well with this. You could also use like Stays On or one of those type of inks. I mean, there's so many inks out there now, hybrid inks. I don't have every type of ink in the world, so I'm using what I have. I add some of these little interesting shapes, different ones. I add some dots in a blue at the top just to make it more interesting, and a few down at the bottom. And I'm pretty happy with that, so I go ahead and shrink them down. Super easy. They shrink very quickly with a heat tool like this. This is a heat tool for embossing. It's hot, hot, hot. And I'm using a stylus to keep them from running away across the desk as I try to do them. So these require just a tiny bit of trimming where I still didn't get it quite right, but it's works fine with scissors. It's no big deal. This time I added a little bit of rainbow alcohol ink on the backs of them before I put them in the bezels. Alcohol ink would be another great choice for stenciling on these little plastics. If you have light colors, I just have to caution you to use light colors so that when the plastic shrinks, it won't be super dark. This is always the struggle, is how dark it's going to get, because something that's red when it's large will look like black or dark brown when it's shrunk. So you have to keep your colors light. But I wanted a little bit of extra sparkle, so I put that rainbow alcohol ink, which is like a kind of like a mica diamond type of alcohol ink made by Marabou, on there, and then I glued that side down, and then I put some extra of the Dimensional Magic over the top to make it extra shiny and kind of a plastic, top. If you've enjoyed this video on making shrink plastic StencilGirl stenciled earrings, be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment or question below, subscribe if you haven't already. All those things help our channels grow, so that's very important. So here you can see, as I'm twisting them in the light, how the shiny silver looks shining through the back. That's why I made this extra little bit of close-up video for you to see what they really look like. And of course there's pictures at the end and a list of supplies below the video. That's it for me for today. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.